also the director of content and curriculum. So teacher, content and curriculum coming together, and stress happens to be one of my favorite things to teach on and talk about. My primary goal today is for you to walk away with a lived experience of decompressing and relieving some stress. So we're going to do 3 different practices. The first one that we're going to start with here in just a moment is an acronym practice called the STOP practice, and it's an introduction to mindfulness meditation practice. The second practice we're going to do is going to incorporate a little bit of movement with the body. And the third practice that we will end the session with is a breathing practice. So you'll get a few different practices to take with you today, and then we'll sprinkle in some information in between. So I'm going to share my screen because I just have a little supportive presentation here to support our presentation today. Hopefully everybody can see that. And this is where you are. You're in this Begin Again workshop that is specifically focused on stress relief. So you're in the right space if that's what you came for, and I promise to honor your time as we have the next 26 or 27 minutes together. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with a practice, which is kind of my favorite way to start. So if, like me, your legs are crossed, go ahead and uncross them so that your feet are flat on the floor. Having shoes or socks on is totally fine. You don't need to remove anything. And then if you find yourself the spine was kind of slouching or kind of relaxed against the chair, maybe just slide forward a few inches. We don't need to make the spine rigid, but we just want an element of energy or alertness in the spine. And then just opening the ears for just a quick moment. I'm going to take about 30 seconds to quickly describe this practice. This practice uses the acronym STOP. And this is a practice that was designed by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the founding fathers of mindfulness in the West. And it is one of my favorite introductory practices to mindfulness because it's one that you can do as short as 30 seconds. You can make it longer. We'll probably do it for about 3 minutes today. And it goes like this. So the S stands for stop. So it's really just hitting the pause button on whatever you're doing. The T is to take an intentional breath. So just intentionally breathing in and intentionally breathing out. The O typically is the longest portion of the practice. So it could be maybe for a period of 15 or 30 seconds or as long as 5 minutes. And that is where you observe. You observe kind of what's in the body, what's in the mind, if there's an emotion that's present. And you're doing that without judgment or attachment or without trying to fix it. It's almost like you're standing back and just witnessing what's in the field. And then the P is proceeding. But I love this phrase at the end of that, proceeding with care. So once you've observed what's there, maybe you observed a certain amount of frustration or anger, then you're proceeding kind of holding that reality. So it might actually, the way that you proceed might shift slightly as a result of what you observe during the O portion of the practice. So we're going to shift into the practice now, and I'm going to watch the clock for about 90 seconds during the O observe portion of the practice. So we've got our feet flat on the ground. We've got our spine relatively alert, but not stiff. Find a resting place for your hands. And then maybe move your gaze actually away from the screen so you can hear me, but you might just kind of look out in front of you, find something pleasant to look at. Or if it feels good to you, maybe just close the eyes. You might even think of the eyelids almost like a curtain, and you're just pulling that curtain over the eyes for these next few minutes. And so right away, we've moved into the S part of the practice. We've stopped what we were doing. And then take a really intentional breath. So as you breathe in, you're aware that you're breathing in. And as you breathe out, you're fully aware that you're breathing out. And then begin to observe what's here. And sometimes the first thing that we observe is a physical sensation. Maybe this sensation of what you're sitting on or what you're wearing. You may observe that the mind is still processing something that's happened earlier today, that maybe it's still trying to work through. Just remind yourself right now, we're just observing. We're not trying to fix or change anything. Just really making a mental note of what's here in this space. The last 30 seconds or so of this observation period, you may notice an emotional tone, kind of something that the heart is holding. If that emotion has a name, you could always name it for yourself. Just really acknowledging that it's here. And then use your next breath to begin to proceed with care. Still holding the awareness of everything that you observe. You can begin to blink open the eyes. There's no need to rush back to the screen, but when you're ready, you can come back into this community together. So that's the stop practice. And again, that could be super quick, something you do in 30 seconds. Or it could be a little bit longer, like we just did, but I find this one really valuable. I'm going to shift now and talk a bit about how stress ends up in the body. So we typically understand stress as starting in the mind, which is true. It does tend to start in the mind, but it often ends up as a physical experience or a physical memory even. And when we have chronic stress, it can turn into some of the ailments that are identified here. So, up in the brain, we can get migraines, we can get headaches, eye strain, but also depression, anxiety, panic and anxiety attacks. In the heart, there's a lot of different studies that have been done, particularly with cardiologists that are looking at the correlation between chronic stress and rise in blood pressure or the occurrence of heart attacks. The stomach, man, I don't know about you, but my digestion is often directly correlated to how I am existing with the stress in my life. And I want to pause and say that stress is neither literally nor figuratively a four-letter word. It's not a negative. It's not a bad thing. In fact, it is a part of being human. It's something we all experience. And in fact, we're under stress all the time. Quite literally, the body is under stress in the form of gravity all the time. And so it's less about eliminating stress, which is a falsehood, not something we could do, and more about identifying what are the tools and resources that we need in order to manage it more optimally so that stress isn't driving the bus, that we're actually operating from kind of our own personal center of balance and well-being. And then finally, physical aches and pains, low back pain. Again, I mentioned headaches, joint pain. When the body is talking to you, that's often a very clear identifier that chronic stress is really existing in the body. And so at Studio B, one of the primary things that we really try to do is we know we tend to live in these first three top circles. We live in a relatively frazzled, urgent, fast-paced space. We often are operating from a place of distraction or being disconnected and loneliness, feeling a little bit isolated and a lack of belonging or connectivity. And so what a lot of the practices when we're really, again, using our resources and our tools to help manage our stress more effectively, they can help us feel more calm. That can also look like clarity of thought as well as creativity. It can help us be more focused, more able to respond, problem solve in more effective ways, and ultimately to feel more connected, whether that's within our work systems, within our family life, or within our communities at large. This feeling of like, ooh, this is where my puzzle piece fits in. So we're going to shift and use the physical body now. And this is one of my absolute favorite practices. What I like about this practice, and I'll tell you up front, this is going to be about a 4.5 minute practice, is we're going to shake, we're going to swing, and we're going to balance. And this particular practice, the shaking is sort of invigorating. It's a great way. They've done a lot of studies at looking how shaking helps to move stagnant energy. It's an automatic nervous system restarter. If you have a pet, I have a puppy. When she comes out of her crate in the morning, she walks out, she does one big stretch, and then she does a full body shake. And it's like her way of like introducing her nervous system to a new day. Animals do the same thing if they've had, like maybe they've been attacked or you've almost hit an animal with your car. If it runs its run off and escapes that, first thing it does is this full body reset of a shake. So we're going to shake for 1 minute. Then we're going to swing. And the swing, you can almost envision a metronome and that movement of the metronome back and forth. It's very soothing, almost like a lullaby for the body, but it also happens to be great for circulation. This is really good. I often do swinging in between meetings. Even if they're back to back, I'll stand up and do a swing for 30 seconds. And then the last portion of the practice is balancing, just great for developing kind of more cognitive health overall, but particularly developing focus and concentration. It's a way to kind of get out of the head and into the body. Okay, so I'm going to move my chair back and I'm going to come to stand so you can see me. And if you have the ability to stand, I would certainly welcome that you do that with me. If you feel more comfortable seated, particularly if you're in a group setting like in a cubicle, you can totally do these 3 movements while seated. Okay, so we're going to move back. I'm going to try not to decapitate myself when I move back. And we're going to start with the feet here a little bit wider than hip distance apart. And then we're going to start that shaking. So I start by kind of bouncing my knees. And you may notice your mind immediately has thoughts about, oh, I feel silly. And you're kind of holding back. And see if you can just kind of let that narrative go and just really embrace shaking. I have a clock right here that I'm watching. You got about 40 seconds to go. Maybe move the shoulders, let the wrists and the fingers move. Don't lose your reins if they're loose. Maybe move the hips. You can even lift a foot and really shake it out. There's no wrong ways to do this. We got about 20 seconds. Keep shaking. Feel free to close the eyes so you're kind of like eliminating the judgment of sight sometimes. 11, 10, keep shaking, keep going, maybe bounce. 5, 4, 3, 2, stop, and just start to sway from side to side, almost like you're dancing with yourself. And then once that swaying starts to feel comfortable, like you've kind of got the natural rhythm of your body down, then let the natural inertia of that movement come into your torso and your arms. So I'm not really controlling my arms or my torso here. It's just like the natural energy of this movement. Depending on your balance, some people like to close their eyes here. Other people find that disorienting, so you can open. About 25 seconds. Maybe you feel kind of it's like a whew, whew. An element of kind of like flying here. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and just slowly let that swinging come to a halt. And then you might look down and bring the feet about hip distance apart, kind of right underneath your hip points. Arms can just relax. Take a moment just to feel the feet on the ground. And again, maybe just really notice your breathing in on your next. Notice your breathing out on the exhale. We're going to start to balance. So as you inhale, lift your right heel. And then lift your left heel so you're suspended on the ball of both feet. As you exhale, lower your right. Inhale, you're up on the ball of both feet. Exhale, you lower the left. So we're just alternating sides, up and down. And you don't need to worry about time. and watching the clock. Do this about another 45 seconds. And if this starts to feel comfortable, you can really kind of marry the breath with the movement. So you inhale to rise and exhale to lower. Always hold on to the back of a chair or place a hand on a wall as like a point to stabilize your balance. Final few seconds. The next time you lower a heel, go ahead and lower both heels. Maybe place the hands on the sides of the ribs to the lower belly. Close the eyes for a moment. Noticing how it is now. Recognizing you're actually still balancing in this moment. Effortlessly balancing. Release the hands. Maybe you blink the eyes a couple of times. If you stood up like I did, you're welcome to come back to your chair and come back to the communal screen. I'm going to pause for about a 1-minute little group connection in the chat. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to share about that experience, maybe you preferred the shaking or the swinging or the balancing, I'd love to hear that at this point. Or if there was a particular outcome that you're aware of, feel free to drop a word or phrase. Anything that's coming up, just so that this is feeling a little bit more like a dialogue. I know we love the webinars. We don't have to turn on our screens, but sometimes it can feel like, who's else in the room with us? Wonderful. Okay. So we're going to move. I'm just going to share a few different thoughts around a practice called the window of tolerance. Oh, good. We've got a couple in the chat that I'm just going to say. Oh, you like the swinging and the balancing, Julie? Yeah. I'm kind of a sucker for the swinging myself. Wonderful, Sally. I'm so happy that was your experience. Yeah. Amazing. So we're going to shift into, this may be a topic that you're familiar with, the window of tolerance. I'm going to do a really brief overview of this, and then I want to bring in something I've recently learned around resilience and anti-fragility that's sort of connected to the window of tolerance. So the window of tolerance, as it says here, you can visualize a window, and it's really, when you're inside of the window of tolerance, it's that place where you can access your both reason, clarity of thought, as well as like emotional clarity. And in terms of your body, you feel stable, safe, and strong. So it's that place where you're in your optimal state in all levels, okay? When you're above the window of tolerance, it tends to be when you're in a hyper state. Overreactive, unclear thought patterns might look like panic or anxiety or kind of that super foggy, frazzled brain. And that's where we can use the practices like we just did with the balancing that help to really calm you down, help to really drop you back into your body to feel settled and anchored again. Now, the opposite is true when you're underneath the window of tolerance, where you're more in a hypo state. So that's where you tend to experience the depression, the lethargy, like you don't have any get up and go. You're even numb. You can't even access emotion or feeling. You're kind of shut down. And in that case, you can do some of the more invigorating practices, perhaps like the shaking or the swinging that we did earlier, or even that stop practice works very well with both. Because when you're in that state of observance, you might become aware of the hyper or the hypo state, and then that then informs how you might need to bring in a particular support or tool to bring you back into your window of tolerance. So we've got the window of tolerance, and the last thing I'll say about that is the window is not fixed. It actually changes. I was going to say day by day, but not even that is true. It can be moment by moment, hour by hour. I'll give you an example. You know, maybe you're coming back from vacation, you're feeling incredibly restored, energized, ready to get back to work, excited. Your window might be actually really large. You know, there's a lot of kind of range for you to still be in your optimal state. On the other hand, maybe you have a sick loved one and you haven't been sleeping well and you're very worried about the outcome of that illness. Your window could be very narrow. And so the way in which you need to resource yourself to take care of yourself is quite different in those two scenarios. Before we move on to our last practice, and I'm aware of time, we've got about 9 minutes left. I want to introduce this idea, and this is a new learning for me, so I'm certainly not showing up as an expert here, but I found this incredibly interesting and an area of deep curiosity for me that I want to continue to learn about. Particularly since 2020, we've heard a lot about resilience, and a lot of our workplaces have come in with resilience training, or they're wanting to do more things about building more resilient teams, more resilient individuals. But there's a new phrase that's coming out, anti-fragility, that's sort of resilience 2.0, and I find it really compelling. So the basic definition of resilience is a material that has the ability to return back to its natural or original state quite quickly. So I'll use the example of a ball. If you have a ball and you apply a stress on that ball so that the ball contracts and gets crumpled, and then you relieve that stress, you take the stress off and the ball inflates back to its original state. That is a resilient ball. It is made of a resilient material, okay? Anti-fragility, again, is resilience 2.0. So it is not only is it resilient, but it gets stronger or bigger, okay? So that would be if you did the same thing to the ball, when you released the stress, it not only re-inflated to its original state, but maybe it got like thicker or stronger, or maybe it got bigger, okay? We are naturally anti-fragile, and I'll use the example of our muscles. If you walk regularly or have a yoga practice or perhaps do any sort of weightlifting or resistance training, what do the muscles do? Not only do they become more resilient, they're actually become more anti-fragile because they get stronger and bigger over time, okay? Now, something that I think is important to bring in that's the opposing side of that. If you take this ball again, you apply the pressure, and you never relieve the stress. You just keep applying the stress constantly. Does the ball ever have opportunity to develop resilience or anti-fragility? It's a rhetorical question. No, it doesn't. If we allow ourselves to operate in a way in our workspaces, in the demands that we place upon ourselves at home, in a way that we are chronically under stress, and we're not carving out intentional space, whether it's 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever that looks like, to take the stress off, to take the pressure off. That's a recipe for burnout and overwhelm. We can't possibly become resilient or anti-fragile, no matter how many trainings we sign up for, if we're not holding sacred that space for deep rest and restoration. So we're going to shift into the final practice, which is a breath practice. We all have one of these guys. It's usually within hand's reach, as mine is right now. We have 6 minutes left in a session together. This is a mobile device. Your breath, I would argue, is the ultimate mobile device, because wherever you are physically, the breath is there with you. It is breathing you alive, quite literally. That's how much your breath loves you, keeps you alive moment by moment without you even thinking about it. And so we are going to do a breath awareness practice, a very simple practice, just to drop into some deep appreciation for the breath and hopefully get a feeling of some stress relief. I am going to bring in some music, so you might hear that coming in while we're in the practice. So just know that that is me bringing in music. So let's begin by please uncrossing your legs if they're crossed, once again, bringing them on the floor. And then again, welcoming in just that quality of aliveness in the spine. Just this, my spine is alive, alert. And then for this practice, the hands are resting somewhere comfortably. You could move the eyes away from the screen, either find something that's nice to look at, or once again, let the curtain of your eyelids close over the eyes. And begin by simply becoming aware of the breath in the body. You may even try to identify where in the body you feel the breath. And then draw your awareness to the nose, in particular to the nostrils. Maybe noticing that as the breath comes in, there's a slight cooling sensation, and as the breath goes out, slightly warmer. And then allow your awareness to drop down to the throat. Maybe just swallow a time or two. And every time you swallow, you're encouraging the throat to relax or release any tension, any holding that's there. You may even check in with the jaw. Maybe just separate the bottom and top rows of teeth, just letting there be a real spacious quality to the back of the mouth and the jaw. And then drop the awareness down to the upper chest, around the collarbones. Maybe noticing the rise and the fall of the collarbones, similar to waves, growing and cresting. Just noticing the breath in the upper chest. And then dropping the awareness down into the rib area. Noticing that as you breathe, the breath actually moves the body, expands it from side to side. You're not controlling that, you're just watching it, allowing it to happen naturally. And finally, bringing your awareness down into the belly. Noticing almost how a baby breathes when they're sleeping, that the belly naturally moves with the breath, like a balloon that inflates and deflates with each inhale and exhale. We'll stay here giving you 30 seconds of silence to just be a breathing body. And then as we prepare to close the practice, you can allow your next breath to become slightly more invigorating, maybe a little bit deeper. And then as you're ready, just gently guiding yourself back to the screen. So that concludes our time together. And I know that we are all busy. And yet I want to express deep gratitude that you took the time to be here for 30 minutes today. So thank you so much for sharing this space for me. The chat is open. If you have anything to share or questions to ask, information about how you can drop in more with Studio B. Next week, same time, same place, we'll be talking about time management. Thank you so much, Judy. I see your appreciation, reflecting that back to you. And I will stay and be the last person in the room. So just know I'm not going to close the room till everyone is gone, but appreciating each of you. And I'll watch the chat. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for being here. Oh, Sally, I'm so happy. That makes me so appreciative. Thank you for saying that. Have a wonderful day.